yes, at face value. Right? If you just read the words on the page, it seems like these socialists and communists are talking about something totally different. But if you put aside these words and you listen to the problems they're describing, they are the exact same problems that everyday democracy-loving, flag-waving Americans have. Hello, beautiful faces. My name is Stephanie Edmonds. Welcome to Teaching Liberty. To live free, you have to think free. And in this video, I want to continue giving you a different perspective on the Israel-Palestine conflict. If you haven't seen my last few videos, I highly recommend going to check those out. But in this video, I'm going to give you an update on the student protests and continue to expand my analysis on the dynamics of the national conversation we're having with this conflict. Of course, between the police crackdown and the end of the school year, most of the encampments have cleared out, but I actually had the opportunity to make it out to New York City and see one for myself before it was cleared out. So we're going to start with that footage that I shot over at the Fashion Institute of Technology on May 6th, and then we'll take a step back. As I've previously pointed out, there seems to be a need to jam this conflict through our domestic culture wars. So on the one side, we have our woke communists who seemingly just want to start a revolution and decolonize everything. And on the other side, we have our anti-woke, who in the words of Douglas Murray, want to save the West. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I have much more in common with regular people, whether they consider themselves woke or anti-woke or whatever label it happens to be. I have more in common with these regular people than I do with the politicians in our government and their donors. I'm really trying to do something different here and not just chase headlines or repeat the same commentary that you hear on other channels, but rather give nuance to the conversation where I feel that it's missing. So share this video out with your friends. Tell them we need to be having more of this conversation. Make sure you hit the like button and you're subscribed to the channel. And as always, I want to know what your thoughts are in those comments down below. Now, let's get into this.
I came out to New York City to see for myself what the deal is with the pro-Palestinian encampments. I planned this trip last week when there were tons of protests all throughout the city, Columbia University, Fordham University, CUNY, but as of today, those have all been cleared out. And the only one remaining is here at the Fashion Institute of Technology on 27th between 7th and 8th Avenue. And so you can see behind me, there are students who are camped out here. They have a bunch of tents behind them. They have their list of demands. They have a food pantry. They have some information here for us. I did try to engage in a conversation with them and they thanked me for coming out. They shared a little bit of what's going on. However, I was being redirected to their media liaison. I gave them my number in hopes that maybe they'll reach out to me, and if I'm still around, I can come back and get an interview. So it is somewhat disappointing that as activists and people who support this cause, they won't engage with people. That's not a very familiar tactic that I'm used to in all of my activism that I've done. I'm pretty much willing to talk to almost anyone. Of course, there's some people who you can see are not there to engage in good faith, and so you avoid them. I do understand their hesitation because of the way that they're being framed in the media, because of the way that people are, again, not acting in good faith, even perhaps if they seem like they are. So again, I understand, a little disappointed, but as you can see, it's peaceful. It is very much focused on the cause, right? It's very much focused on divestment from all of the companies that are profiting from the Israeli apartheid, right? They want their university, right? Universities, they have big endowments and they want their university to not be invested in companies that are supporting the apartheid, that are supporting the genocide. They want financial transparency, which that really is part of number one. If you don't know where the money is going, that's an issue. They want the university to condemn the Israeli apartheid and genocide. They want any students who have been charged in relation to their advocacy to have their charges dropped. I'm not sure what if students were arrested or if that just means like they're in trouble with the university for their advocacy. And they say they will not leave until their demands are met. I did ask if they would continue on after the school year ends, and some of them were like, they kind of seemed like they would say they wanted to go home. I don't know, but they were like, I don't know, you'll have to talk to the other people. But yeah, I just think we see a lot of things on the media. We hear a lot of things in the news. We see a lot of things on social media. We see a lot of little snippet clips and people claiming things are happening, but I'm here seeing it for myself, and it's just kids with some tents, and it's a political issue, right? It's not about identity of Jewish people or anti-Semitism. It is very clearly about this political situation. And I think that's how we have to think about this situation too, just generally, even besides these encampments. A lot of people want to make it about, Jewish people and people not liking Jews, but this is about land and politics. And it will not be solved in a military manner, right? You can squash Hamas and some other resistance faction is going to arise. This cannot be solved through military. We must have a political solution.
So it was unfortunate I couldn't get any of the students to talk to me on camera. I was able to have some brief conversations with them off camera. But when you are down there and you can see for yourself what is really going on, the reality is very disconnected from the narrative that gets spun. And when you have no actual reference point in your real life to judge whether it's true or false or whatever its relationship is to the actual objective reality of the situation, because you're just looking at it through a screen, what you end up doing is projecting your own biases onto that thing. And that's very much what's happening here. People look out and they see blue haired college kids wearing masks, proclaiming to be socialists and handing out workers of the world paper. And they say, I disagree with those people. And I get it. For the past 3 years during COVID, and even before that, as the culture wars really heated up, I've been on the opposite side of most of these communist college kids and their allies out in the world. I think their underlying premise and arguments and worldview is very flawed in many ways. I believe communism or any other version of collectivism leads to tyranny every single time. However, when I actually listen to what these kids are saying or, what they're writing in their literature, they're essentially arguing against the state. They don't always have great solutions, but they're very good at identifying the problem. They really have the same concerns as you and I. In this one article called Join the Fight for Socialism, they talk about how imperialism threatens people of the world and the planet itself in their never-ending quest for ever greater profits. They talk about joblessness, homelessness, and the lack of hope for the future. They go on to talk about how the US is the richest country in the world, and yet no one is guaranteed the right to shelter, food, water, healthcare, education, or anything else unless they can pay for it. So again, I don't agree with the notion that these things are human rights and should just be provided for free. I do think that people should pay for it. Like I said, they don't have good solutions, but they're identifying the problem and they're showing up for these people who are being left behind. They say things like, our wealth is being stolen. And again, I agree. Now, they blame the capitalists, whereas I would blame the Federal Reserve in cahoots with our government, who does things like ship it overseas in the form of aid or comes up with every excuse in the book to print more money at the snap of a finger, which devalues it and steals it in real time from us in the form of inflation. And so, yes, at face value, right, if you just read the words on the page, it seems like these socialists and communists are talking about something totally different than what I'm talking about, or what sort of traditional Americans who believe in democracy, republicanism, free markets, and capitalism, it seems very different. But if you put aside these words and you listen to the problems they're describing, they are the exact same problems that everyday democracy loving, flag waving Americans have. We are simply using different words to describe the same problem. And now I don't think these guys have good solutions. And I think it's because they have some of their definitions confused. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But I want to share a story real quick before we get into that, that really exemplifies what I'm talking about. And I want to take it totally out of this context of Israel, Palestine, and these socialist communist kids and bring it down to local politics. So, as I've talked about, I am registered as a Democrat. I had been unaffiliated, which here in Connecticut is what you are if you have no party. I know in some states it's independent, but in Connecticut, independent is an actual party. So I was unaffiliated for a long time. And then when Tulsi Gabbard was running for president, I was like, I like what she's saying. You know, a lot of her policies were just your regular run of the mill Democratic policies, but she was extremely anti war. And that is perhaps my number one issue, especially when it comes to presidential politics. So I became a Democrat for that reason. And then I stayed a Democrat. I did a small stint back at unaffiliated. And then realizing that living in a supermajority Democratic state, as well as a supermajority Democratic city, actually the seat of the Democratic Party's power in my state, I said, the most effective thing I can do is become a Democrat again. And so I've been a Democrat and I've been participating particularly in local Democratic elections. And I went out to go do some campaign organizing. I show up at this house and in front they have one of these signs. In this house, we believe, Black Lives Matter, science is real. You know the sign I'm talking about. And I go, oh God, this is going to be interesting to say the least. So I walk in and it was a sign making party. So everybody's drawing out their designs and talking about local politics and the big issues. And I start hearing them complaining about taxes being too high. I hear them talking about corruption in our local government between developers and local government officials. I hear them bragging about having the endorsement of the local police union. And I'm like, that's weird because those are all issues that I agree with. And that really just put it into focus for me that on the national level, it's just a rhetorical difference. But when it's real issues that are really in your everyday lives, it doesn't matter whether you have the R or the D or you're unaffiliated. Regular people have the same exact concerns. And so I say that to say this, that those blue haired college kids or those Bernie supporters, they're just like you. They have the same concerns as you. It is just a rhetorical difference. We have different definitions for the same words because they look at our government and they say, well, that government calls itself democratic. That government calls itself Republican. That government says we operate on a free market capitalist system, and look how it's played out for us. Look where our country is. So, if that's what democracy looks like, if that's what republicanism looks like, if that's what free market capitalism looks like, I am the opposite of that. And what is the opposite of that? It's communist, it's socialist. And there's a disconnect between what our government actually is. I believe it is much closer to some collectivist form of governing, right? Whether it's communist, socialist, fascist, take your pick. It is much closer to those things than it is to a true democratic, Republican, free market form of government on which this country was founded. I really think that we need to get over the rhetorical divide and realize we all want the same things. We all want to live in a society where we feel represented, where we have opportunity, and we need to figure out how to bridge this rhetorical divide. I'm not in leftist circles. I am much more in the anti woke, freedom, right of center group. And so that's who I'm talking to. And what I need for you guys to do, or what I am advocating, is that we have to be willing, first of all, to admit that the country that we live in is much, much closer to some collectivist form of government. We don't have to worry that the communists and the Marxists are coming. They are already here. They are already occupying our government, and they call themselves liberals and Republicans and whatever the label. They've occupied it and colonized it, but they are actually communists. They are actually socialists. And so the first step is admitting the problem is already here. It is not China or Russia or Iran or insert whatever foreign boogeyman that people like to point to as something that we have to worry about. The communists, the Marxists, the socialists, they are already here, and they are already in power, and they are already staging their revolution and moving us in the direction of a one world government. It is happening. And so we need to see that the criticisms that are coming from these leftists are valid. Now, again, they're calling them the wrong thing, right? They're saying that they want socialism and communism and Marxism, but that's because the socialists and the communists and the Marxists call themselves democratic. They call themselves capitalists. So this is all just dialectic manipulation, and we are being played. They are dividing us and conquering us and making us fight against each other, people with no real power. Come on, college kids don't have real power. All this woke stuff is really just a creation of the deep state in cahoots with the elite institutions and government. It is not the college kids or the Bernie supporters or the lady in your neighborhood who has the, in this house we believe that, we need to realize that those people are our allies. And when we can get over this rhetorical divide, this, red paint versus blue paint divide, and come together as we the people. I know a lot of times when I do class analysis of just regular working people, right, and they can be all the way down from poor people through the middle class and even the upper middle class versus the people who are in the special class, right? The people who actually have political power, the people who are in charge of these big corporations that are friends with the people in power that get special deals in order to capture market. So when I do this class analysis, people who go, "You're a Marxist." I'm like, okay. Or you can look at that as the same exact founding ideals of this country. We the people versus the king, those in power, the government. That is the founding ideal of this country, that the government doesn't give us power, that the king doesn't give us power, that some ruling class doesn't give us power. Our rights come from God, or if you prefer, nature, or by virtue of being born. That is where your rights come from. And I don't really see that premise as different from that foundational Marxist idea of the people, of the workers, versus the people in that ruling class. Now, again, it's not exactly the same. And as soon as they start trying to give solutions, they end up at the same exact status totalitarian nightmare where we find ourselves today. But we need to get over that rhetorical divide and really find a way to speak a more common language. And so I know we've gotten far away from the Israel Palestine issue, and I want to bring it back to that because what I see again happening with this issue is just reactionary politics. It's like, oh, those woke, blue haired college kids, leftists support Palestine. Well, that obviously means I need to be against it. Simply being against what the other side thinks is A, not a principled position, and B, it was something that we could clearly see was wrong when the Democrats and the leftists were operating off of this type of thinking. During the lockdowns, when Trump started saying we need to open up the schools, the people on the left were like, well, if Donald Trump thinks we need to open them, then obviously they need to be closed. And in that circumstance, we could see that type of reactionary politics made no sense and was purely about keeping power and ultimately about dividing the people while the real criminals, Fauci and Rochelle Walensky, I mean, really Trump himself, the Clintons, Bill Gates, all these people got off the hook while we're here yelling back and forth, open the schools, close the schools, you want to kill grandma, you're a crazy leftist. And, it's divide and conquer. And that's exactly what I'm seeing happen here. The left is pro Palestine, so people on the right, and really this new anti woke coalition that's center right, a lot of people from the left came over to join it. They're just looking at the other side and saying, well, if they believe that, then I'm obviously on this side. I could never stand on the side of these woke people. This sentiment is captured in an essay titled, I Changed My Mind on Zionism, thanks to both the irrational left and right. It can be found on the Black Sheep Substack. The author, Salome Siboney, writes, because the right relies on the left for discerning what moral direction to run in, they're approaching the Israel-Palestine conflict on easy mode, ignoring knowledgeable advocates to instead dunk on naive students and activists who can only see the world through leftist dogma. When you don't know how much you don't know, someone like Destiny rambling on with his usual false bravado seems convincing because it speaks to the level of understanding most of America's newest Zionists hold, a history that started on October 7th and counterarguments a trained parrot could outdo. A couple paragraphs later, she goes on to write, it's a humbling experience to realize how easily we can be led to adopt beliefs incompatible with our values through the right mix of shocking tragedy, biased media consumption, and antagonism from ideologues. It would be easier for me not to write this essay, as I'll likely gain little from publishing it and maybe even lose opportunities. Unlike mocking neopronouns and bemoaning cancel culture, it requires risk to take this stance. It's clear that speaking out against Zionism will put me at odds with many people I'd like to remain in good standing with, but I know my position will eventually be vindicated and that the narrative changes one voice at a time. So once again, I find myself a black sheep. I am not an unhinged leftist or right-wing ideologue. Let the fact that I defy the straw man stereotype of an anti-Zionist be your catalyst for reconsidering your understanding. In hindsight, Zionism will be seen as far more destructive and morally indefensible than vaccine mandates or lockdowns. Mistakes the right is fond of imagining how history will portray. We will look back on Zionism with the same moral disdain that most of us look on any ethno-nationalism with. Instead of falling for yet another collectivist ideology that weaponizes identity to justify authoritarianism, we should abide by the approach that promotes fairness and freedom, treating all people as individuals, not as groups. The flaws in ethno-nationalism are exactly what America solved by offering a nation that could belong to anyone who shared its ideals, regardless of identity. It's this ideal that needs fighting for, not more of the same identity-based systems of the past, no matter what new hierarchy they promote. Recognizing how Zionism perpetuates this pattern will provide you a new level of clarity. You will see what many haven't yet. Defeating the authoritarian left is not as simple as running blindly to the authoritarian right. The Zionist right and the Marxist left are the ideologically captured collectivist enemies each of them deserves. Luckily, these aren't the only two choices for a more enlightened humanity. They are simply the obstacles to it. We are in an age that requires people who act on principles, not as partisans. Unfortunately, it's the truth and innocent individuals who will pay the cost until we close yet another chapter in the long, ugly history of groupthink. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do on this channel. I believe by standing on the founding ideals of this nation, yes, they have been implemented imperfectly, and there are plenty of ways we can point back to our country's flaws. But if we stand as individuals on these ideals, we can overcome the dialectical manipulation which divides us. We can gain the trust of our friends who wear different labels because they'll see that we are acting from a place of principle and not from ideology. And so with that, I urge you to reflect on your positions and ask yourself, are they from a place of principle? Or are they from a place of reactionary ideology manipulated by the media and by our preconceived notions of somebody's label? And I urge you to direct your frustration, your anger, your ire at those who are truly in power. Stop wasting your time dunking on college kids with blue hair and leftists, or if you're on the left, stop dunking on people who you consider right-wing extremists and direct it towards the people who are actually in power. And better yet, stop giving these people in power the power. They thrive off of our attention, our energy, our money that we donate to their campaigns. And take that attention and that focus and that time and that money and that energy and put it into your local community. Sure, politics is an aspect of that, and I do believe we have to stay engaged. Otherwise, they'll just come up to your door and into your house and chop your daughter's breasts off. However, we should be putting just as much time, energy, money, resources, if not more, into building our local communities and networks. Homeschooling our children, divesting ourselves in as many ways as possible from the government and its services to the point where they are rendered completely irrelevant. Maybe you see it exactly like I do. Maybe you don't. I want to know your thoughts in those comments down below. Make sure you hit that like button. If you're new, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend. We got to start thinking differently. So again, maybe this isn't exactly how you see it, but this is not a perspective that you are going to hear or see in many places. So share it out and let me know your thoughts. And until next time, think free, live free, and give all the glory to God.
Come on.